So we're right on time here at 1 o'clock to kick off the meeting, and we have quite a lot on the agenda. So I want to just dive in. Welcome everyone to today's meeting of the Monadnock Broadband Group. We're a little high on the attendee count for individual introductions, but would encourage you to say hello and introduce yourself via the chat. Especially if you're new, a newer attendee. We often get a couple of new folks each meeting. And as a reminder, we have opted to make recordings of these meetings available on our webpage, which is listed at the bottom of this slide. And I will send out a notification as soon as those are that's available. All right. So for those joining with a computer, tablet, smartphone, each device is a little bit different, but you should have access to provide feedback on the meeting in a way similar to what you see on the left. Yes, no, thumb up, thumb down, raising and lowering your hands. That's kind of access via the participants button. Other tips, if you're not speaking, please hit the mute button to prevent background noise from bleeding into the rest of the meeting. And there will be multiple points to comment, ask questions, participate, and would ask, when you're able to try to take advantage of that raise hand function. I'll then call on you and you can unmute yourself. And just a reminder, you can do this if you're just dialed in, although I don't think anyone is just dialed in. If I'm wrong, if you're just using a telephone to join the meeting, *6 will mute or unmute you, and you can use *9 to raise or lower your hand. You might want to write that down. Okay. Next slide. We have a pretty long agenda today. We're actually going to aim for a 2 o'clock finish, but we'll go longer if there is a desire to have more discussion on any of these topics. Before getting to that first agenda item, a quick recap of the last meeting. We learned about AT&T's wireless plans for our region from Ryan Clark, Regional Director of External Affairs, and Owen Smith, President of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. For me, at least, it was interesting to hear about some of the increases in wireless internet usage over the last couple months, and a little bit more about how they see kind of 5G evolving and rolling out around the country. Mike Reed of Mission Broadband, who's joining us again today, thank you, alerted us to the state's social distancing broadband impact survey that was developed by Mission Broadband and Carroll Miller at New Hampshire BEA. We sent out an announcement on that. And we'll hear more later. And finally, we heard from a number of communities on what's front burner in their town or city. Hopefully we'll hear from a lot of you in this meeting too. And one action item from the meeting was submitting a letter to a Senate committee assigned with the review of some notable broadband bills. That's what's pictured on the screen right now. Basically, the long story short, there was, a disrupted legislative session, and the bills we originally talked about were moved into a passed House bill via an amendment. So the discussion at the last meeting was, hey, we should submit our same letter to the committee addressing the broadband bills, and that was done in June in advance of a public hearing on HB 1111. My understanding is the amendment was passed along with the bill, but we'll try to get some confirmation on that in this meeting. This is, again, we're here just agenda 2. This is where I want to turn to it and open the floor to our region's legislators to provide any updates and information relative to broadband legislation this session. It doesn't have to be limited to what's on the screen, but, and I'll also point out that the Connecting New Hampshire Broadband Expansion Program does have a separate agenda item. Maybe with that, I'll just, for the sake of some order to this, maybe call on attendees and just skim over the attendee list and invite you to unmute yourself. Is Senator Deach on the call today? Let's see, scrolling through the list, I don't see Senator Deach right now. So we'll pass on Senator Deach for now. I do see Senator Khan was able to join us. Senator Khan, could you provide an update or any comments?
Certainly, Henry, thank you. I see Senator Ward in my screen. So hello, Senator. And thanks for convening us. These bills both passed with very solid majorities in the House. So, and I think unanimously in the Senate. They are bipartisan, at least on the 459 and 559. But like I say, I think both of these bills, so what happened is 459 and 559 got combined together, an effort that Senator Bradley and I led, and it's small tweaks to the current statutes that should make it more clear the process of the request for information. So when towns do an RFI, that they can declare parts of their town unserved if current providers are unresponsive to providing mapping information about what are the households served in the community or properties served in the community. So that's the primary effort. The 457 on the establishing communication districts follows the water district statutes of the state, and so water sewer shared systems have sections of statute that allow towns to combine for those services, and it would allow towns in our region and across the state to form districts for the purpose of soliciting proposals for broadband in multiple communities. That's where we stand. And then you're going to get into the funding possibilities through the CARES Act, and be glad to take any questions folks have.
Thanks, Senator Khan, for the background on those. Did I hear you correctly when you said that the bill did pass the Senate?
Yeah, these three bills, which became, as I said, became two, 459 and 550. I'm sorry, 457 and 559. These are the two bills that were combined into House Bill 1111.
I would just add that when they went over to the House, they concurred with a veto-proof majority, and it passed the Senate with a veto-proof majority.
And Gene, I think that there were just 48 votes that were against it, right?
Correct. It passed, I think it was
Unusual.
one of the most popular bills on the last day of House session.
Great. And Senator Deach, do you have any other updates that you'd like to share relative to what's happened with the legislative session?
Well, I think it's when we get into the money that that people are most interested, and you're going to hear a lot of complaints about the way the CARES proposal was written. So I think that's probably what most people want to hear about.
Yeah, and as I said, we will have a separate item to get into that a little bit more. So maybe next turn to other legislators that have participated in past meetings. And I'll apologize, I kind of have to skim the attendee list and look for folks, but from the office of Senator Shaheen, Chris Scott, Pam Slack, Michelle Cota have attended, and invite anyone from that office to chime in next.
If they're not here, Henry, I just talked with Michelle this morning by email, and she said everything's very fluid. They've got nothing solid going forward yet.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll try and look out to see if they join us a little bit later. From the office of Senator Hassan, Bobby Graham and Carrie Holmes have joined us at past meetings. And I don't see Bobby or Carrie on the meeting yet. So we'll keep moving. And I'm also looking for Tom Giancola of Senator Custer's office. I'm not seeing Tom on today's meeting. Okay, well,
that would be representative, but
excuse me.
But let me just say, has anyone been keeping up with the FCC's $15 billion grant? What they announced sometime in the last couple of weeks.
Different from RDOF, the Rural Development Opportunity Grant?
Yes.
Is that what we're talking about?
That's what I'm referring to. The name slipped my mind until you just said that.
I know that organizations need to have their short forms in by July 15th for the bidding process in October. And after that date, everybody who's involved in any kind of bidding or communication process is under, sort of strict guidelines in terms of not sharing information amongst themselves, collusion after that. And I know that there are a number of entities in New Hampshire and Vermont, well, from New England, who are looking to bid on some of these areas that are up for auction. So the biggest difference with RDOF, which is the Rural Development Opportunity Program fund, is that they're from the FCC Universal Access funding. But the difference between this and the last round of CAF2 funding is that the requirement is that they have to be in areas that don't have 25.3 coverage. And in the past, that has been 10.1. And so that has opened up a lot of New Hampshire and Vermont and Maine who have a lot of DSL that can't meet the 25.3 criteria. And so there are lots of areas within the state that are eligible. I know that many of the current, of course, providers are looking at that as well. So I can expect that in October, we'll see bids from at least Consolidated. But there are a couple of others. We might see some bids from Tilson in Maine, and we might see some bids from GWI from Maine, who are looking at broadening their scope to New England. And I'm sure that there are others on the horizon as well. Mike, do you know others besides those that?
Hi, Carol. There are some consortiums that are gathering to do things together, and we do have some members, we'll say, or associates of ours around New England that are joining these consortia. So there's much more interest than we've ever seen, that's for sure.
There's a lot of money on the table.
That's a lot of money on the table.
Yeah, and it's more than we've ever seen before from the federal government, which intrigued me about it. But any guidance that somebody has for local communities about this?
It's you have to, in these particular funds, you have to prove that you have, so it's not for any new entities, because you have to prove you have 2 years of audited financials or more, at least 2 to 3 years of operations, and you will be required to put forth a letter of credit for the amount for the areas that you win in the bidding consortium. So for new entities, those 3 criteria are very difficult to do, which is one of the reasons that consortiums and partnerships are sort of developing and happening. But for existing companies, or even existing ISPs or existing wireless companies, then there are opportunities there. There are more points given for fiber versus wireless or other types of technologies. And so, you know, it's a reverse auction, meaning that you bid, you'll be paid on a monthly basis for providing service to these areas in which you might win. And so you bid on a sliding scale, I guess I would call it, at a high level, and then it goes down to the next level and so on until they've weeded out everybody, until they get the lowest price possible. How's that? And so that's what's occurring. And when you think about that, if you're going to provide service to these specific areas, you really need to have service around those areas to get to them, because these are the most unserved areas and the most difficult to get to. And so it's an interesting process, and we'll see how it works out. But we have more players than we've ever had requesting these funds. So for New Hampshire, I think that's a good thing.
Thank you for the question, Senator Khan, and for the info, Carol. Just to add briefly that if you visit SWRBC's broadband page and the resources section, there's a link to that FCC Rural Digital Opportunity Fund program listed in the funding resources section, and includes a map of eligible areas that you might be interested to know about. And I believe Todd Horner from our office posted a link to that in the chat.
And if I could just jump in for a second, Henry, one of the more difficult things is the government has identified the areas, the locations, and if you bid on an area, you have to serve every location. So you'll be able to see that on the map. There's a very good RDOF map with the eligibility areas and the amount of the reserve and so on. But it's a challenge, as Carol said. That's for sure.
Well, so let's maybe come back to this if we want to talk more, but let's keep going on the agenda so we don't get too far behind. I want to shift gears to agenda 3, and it's kind of hard to imagine, but this opportunity opened up and closed between the last meeting of the group and this one. And I know many of you have spent considerable time looking at the RFP. I want to spend just a moment providing an overview of what the program is about for those of you who weren't aware, and then would be interested to open up the floor and hear about proposals that came forward from your community, and what else you'd like to share. switch gears here. So after the program was announced, we helped to get the word out a little bit and set up a basic landing page with some of the bullets. This is federal funding through the CARES Act and $50 million available for expanding broadband to unserved areas. And the RFP came out on the 18th of June. The Q&A period lasted a few days and was extended somewhat, but ultimately proposals were due last Thursday, with the idea that awards would be announced later this month. And maybe the biggest eye-opener for me is the requirement for projects to be completed before the end of the calendar year. And eligible applicants include municipalities, obviously internet service providers. I think that was elaborated to say counties were also eligible applicants. But the goal of the opportunity was to expand internet service at 25.3 or higher to the most addresses possible for the least money from the $50 million pool as possible. And the points, kind of break down with a heavy emphasis on that. So I had short conversations with a number of you in the last couple of weeks, but now's when I wanted to open the floor to hear about proposals that may have been submitted by your community or your community in a partnership with a provider. So hi, Karen. Looks like you're the first to weigh in, so feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, Henry. Thank you. So Karen Hatcher from Peterborough, just wanted to say that we were able to get an RFP together in this time frame, because we had just been having conversation with a couple of providers about how we might go about getting the streets that were uncovered covered. And we had been working on it. So the funding timing was just kind of perfect for us. So Danica Malone, our town planner, got the RFP together and has gotten it out. And I understand that she's heard from 2 providers with interest, and our deadline is the 23rd for full proposal of this month. But obviously, we're also concerned about completing a project by December 15 or something like that. But we're moving forward in good faith and with kind of fingers crossed that maybe some kind of extension will happen. But so we're in the works.
Thanks, Karen. Clarifying question, were you able to make the July 2nd deadline?
Well, there are 2 things, Henry. It was, we clarified, Danica contacted the state about this, and apparently there's the RFP that the state has issued, right? That's looking for, it didn't look like the deadline. I think the deadline was for posting the RFP, not for having completed proposals. If I'm wrong, maybe I'm wrong, but I think, it said that the proposals were due. And I just don't know that was this for the large RFP that the state had posted, or all of them. So she was working closely with, I wish she was on the call because she could tell you exactly, but she was working directly with the state on that and getting clarification. So I hope we got it right. That's what I'll say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there others that were able to scramble and submit a proposal that could tell us a little bit about their proposal? Okay, I did get an email from Rebecca Landry from the city of Keene, and she did share that the um, the provider Spectrum, who's a cable provider in Keene, planned to submit an application for a specific street or a couple of streets, and the city provided a letter of support to that application. She also let me know that the city reached out to Consolidated, but was unsure if they were planning to apply at all, and mentioned supply chain challenges as a particular issue to the December deadline. And that was her update. Any other updates on proposals or things you would like to share about this program?
So this is Carroll. We worked closely with CCI to try and determine if these 5 towns in Cheshire County would be eligible, since the construction within those towns had not yet begun. And these are the towns that had applied for general obligation bonds, and the bonds, of course, are going to be sold by the 14th of July. So it was important to know what our choices might be. It's kind of too bad because for the most part, there's shovel-ready projects. But CCI interpreted the language within this to say that because we had already agreed to work with them, we were not eligible to apply for these funds. And in addition to that, they mentioned the supply chain as well, is trying to get fiber and equipment in place and activated by December 15th would be quite a challenge. And they couldn't be sure of making that deadline, and not making it really has quite a bit of penalty. So to make the deadline, they'd have to bring on all sorts of contractors, and that would cost funding. And then so to do that, and then maybe not get the 90%, because you only get 10% up front, was a real risk to them that they weren't ready to face. And so that was sort of the answer for them about the 5 towns. It's really too bad because these 5 towns I now have general obligation bonds, or will, in the vicinity, I think, as a total, somewhere around just under 10 million, if I added them all up, but under 10 million. So it could have been, and it would have reached a lot of people, but they couldn't commit to that date. And they didn't think that it was eligible anyway, because we had contracts signed with them already, even though they hadn't started construction. And they did try and get that clarified by the state a number of times, but that seemed to be the answer. So just to give you an update on that piece of it. I don't know if they'll apply. I think they have some small projects across the state that they might apply for.
Thanks, Carol. And I think my general understanding is that we would only know about where awards are given after they're approved by GNC, after they're approved by the state. So I see Christine from Temple has been waiting patiently. Would you like to chime in, Christine?
Sure. So we are in a little bit different position than the 5 towns. We have our RFI out right now, so we don't have exact numbers on what we would need. So, you know, we could not put together an application, but we did reach out to CCI and expressed an interest in working with them if they were going to submit an application, and we got a similar response. They did not feel like they could work within the requirements of the RFP, citing the dates, the deadline to be done by the end of the year. They thought was unrealistic. The money just didn't make sense to them, that they'd have to put up a lot of money up front. So it was really disappointing for us and frustrating. It's frustrating because, you know, obviously we would like to take advantage of the funding available as well, but it was just not possible. And we're certainly hoping that maybe there'll be a second round that becomes available and we'll be a little bit further along in the process, but we were also not able to take advantage of this.
Thanks, Christine, for sharing that with the group. Tim, I see you have your hand up.
Well, thanks, Henry, and good afternoon, everyone. So I just thought I'd weigh in on this agenda item. I had conducted a, well, first off, was very enthusiastic upon hearing the governor's announcement, which predated the release of the RFP, that this $50 million fund would be made available. And then, you know, thinking that all this hard work is going to maybe pay off after all. And on the 18th, when the RFP came out and I reviewed it, trying to give it an objective review, I quickly realized just, you know, disappointment. I don't know how else to put it. You know, from everything, and this will duplicate some of the points already been made, but the 2-week turnaround, the extensive data requirements for the application itself, obviously the build out date by, you know, prior to the end of the calendar year, the 90% cost burden that's been mentioned, you know, a signing of an affidavit about, you know, that every address that would be served is in fact one that is not previously previously served. You know, the list kind of goes on, and perhaps maybe the biggest concern I had is when the way I interpret the RFP selection process, or at least the application selection process, that it perpetuates the status quo in the scoring system, as it favors those proposals that you know, can you know, hit the most addresses for the least cost. Well, that sounds great. That's efficient. However, that's what we've been up against for the last 15 years. You know, favoring dense development. And so here we are again, rural part of New Hampshire, and I feel we've been let down by the way this proposal has been set up. If you didn't have a project that was in the sweet spot, then you're out of luck. If you had signed on with the provider, you're too far ahead of the game, you're not eligible, you'll be denied. If you don't have your information pulled together, and if you don't have dense development, and you know, then you're going to have a really hard time meeting that 2-week turnaround, not to mention the end of the calendar year build out. Very risky, very prickly RFP. I communicated some of those sentiments early on with the entity that issued the RFP, the Office of Strategic Initiatives. I didn't get much in the way of response. And the one that I was most concerned about, and continue to be very concerned about, is the continued reference to the fact that the build out date is prior to the end of the calendar year, because that's what the CARES Act requires. So, and I don't profess to being an expert on all the nooks and crannies of the CARES Act, but I could not find any provision within the CARES Act that requires the expenditure of those funds by the end of the calendar year. In fact, what I found is a section that stated that any unobligated CARES Act funds by the end of the calendar year would need to be returned. And from my interpretation, obligated versus expended are two different things. So unfortunately, by the time I put that question forward, where in the CARES Act do you see that the expenditure has to happen by the end of the calendar year, I was informed that I can't tell you because you asked me beyond the question deadline for the RFP. So I've yet to be able to get an answer to that question. And if you compare, or I guess, look at this particular opportunity in conjunction with the FCC opportunity that Senator Khan mentioned earlier in this meeting, the $15 billion that's available. Again, it's not a good match for rural New Hampshire. So I'm concerned, I'm disappointed that we continue to be kind of left in the dark on some of these programs that are coming forward to apparently help those of us who have broadband connectivity issues, that the programs themselves don't seem to be well aligned with who we are. And it may be appropriate for us to make those sentiments like that known if others feel that in a similar way. So I'll stop there, and sorry for the soapbox.
No, not at all, Tim. I think your frustrations are some of the things I heard from our communities digesting the RFP over the last couple of weeks. There are a couple of people who've been waiting with their hands up. Med Kopczynski from the city of Keene. Go ahead, Med.
Thank you. Tim, it's good to know that Kafka's still alive and well, because that's what seems to be twisting all throughout this tale. I think when it sugars out, we'll probably find that there were some key picked projects that somebody had in mind where this money's going, as opposed to going where it really needs to be, which is out in rural America, especially in rural New Hampshire. Doubly more important because of the crisis that we're having based on COVID-19, which was kind of the basis for this to begin with. So I don't know how we fix this, whether or not there's an organized method to fix this, whether or not we talk to our senators, hint, both federal and state, and see what we can do to unrattle some of these things to make it more workable. I personally would like to know, I don't know if we have to do a public records request or whatever, how they made these decisions, how they came to these deadlines, and where they intend to spend this money, because it's damn not transparent.
Yeah. Well, we can work on the transparency part. I would ask, Tim, I think your analysis, and I shared mine with you, maybe we should pool thoughts together, and Henry, maybe you can be the gatherer. In any case, I think having a pool of thoughts around how this program could have been improved, how the RFP process and the structuring of the program could have been improved, will be valuable. One, 50 million we know is it could be spent very quickly and isn't the full need. Two, these are going to be there'll be new proposals for this, and I think having some best guidance that's coming from towns and people who have been working on this for a while will help future legislation, either from the federal or state levels. But I agree. I thought that the structuring of density was really tilting away from reaching unserved areas.
Great. So I'm seeing a couple people, kind of agreeing with the idea of sharing some of these sentiments, and we're at SWRPC happy to play a role in starting to put some of those together. And maybe one question to ask of the group or talk about briefly is where those would go and when. We know this opportunity is a product of the state's committee that oversees the CARES Act funding. There's also the people who release the RFP, OSI, the Public Utilities Commission, Department of Ed. So would welcome some comments on I guess the who and when. And it's fine if there's no answers now. Are people okay with starting to gather some of these thoughts and points together? Maybe just a yes.
Tim, again, and sorry to butt in, but you're trying to facilitate the meeting, and I just had a chance to look at the chat box, and I'm seeing a lot of sentiment that says that we should try to find a way to catalog these comments and put them forward. Not sure who the right entity is to put the sentiments forward, but it could be a number of different entities. So I think what would be helpful is to, I'm seeing a lot of concurrence with the points that have been raised in this conversation. And if this group, if this body serving as a ad hoc advocacy group, if you will, for broadband needs here in the Monadnock region, probably also speaking effectively for other parts of rural New Hampshire, you would like Henry and Todd and I to work here at Southwest RPC to put some comments together on behalf of the Monadnock Broadband Group and put them forward to audiences that we feel would be the types that ought to hear these sentiments, then we're happy to do that.
Thanks, Tim. So I think I see some yes and more concurrence. So I guess please send those thoughts our way. I'll put out a call to the whole group sometime this week.
I just add, I think the process will run its course. I think that a large provider like CCI felt that they couldn't deliver in, on this proposal. That ought to send, real waves of information. They're the biggest investor in the state right now. So that's my point is to let the process run its course. Not all these dollars are going to get spent. The federal government's going to have states that will either these dollars are either going to get lapsed, or states will find last minute ways of reimbursing themselves, maybe their unemployment insurance funds or things like that. At any rate, this process needs to run its course. I think important for us is to have cataloged what was good and what was not good about the process. We can share that with OSI. That's fine. The Office of Strategic Initiatives, which is running the bid process. But I think being able to inform other entities before future RFPs go out about what would best serve this region through an RFP process. I think that's what I think we're starting to tee up as a learning outcome from this.
Great. Well, thank you to everyone who commented and weighed in on this. I will reach out to the group, as I said, a little bit later this week to get the ball rolling while all those comments are fresh. So moving on to agenda 4, want to kind of briefly introduce and set up Rick Hiland, who is the co-chair of a group called Carroll County Broadband. And I first learned about their work in a statewide conference about digital equity more than a year ago, I think it was. And there is a lot of similarities between their work and our work, in some ways between their county and our region. And they're approaching things in a little bit different way with what I understand as kind of a committee of select board members to a county-wide group. They've been successful in pursuing private and federal funding to support their work. And just want to welcome Rick to join us at this meeting to share kind of who they are and what's front burner to them right now. Rick, are you still here?
I'm here. I have terrible internet access, and when I turn my video on, it goes to being unstable. So I'll turn it on for a little bit and then probably turn it off so I can stay with you folks. Thank you for asking me to join your meeting today. I'm a co-chair along with Steve Knox also of Albany, New Hampshire, in the Carroll County Broadband Committee. We started the committee back a year ago, January, over a cup of coffee. We held 3 workshops where we invited folks from UNH and other people in the internet provider field to talk to us about where we should go and how we should attempt to improve high-speed internet access in Carroll County, which is part of rural New Hampshire. We formed the committee. We formed the committee at the select board level. And we have members from all 19 towns in Carroll County presently. And we also have representatives from the 2 economic development councils, as well as 2 of our regional planning commissions. We have representatives from our SAUs. We also have representation from the Carroll County, the county seat itself, and we have a representative from the commissioners, as well as a representative from the Carroll County delegation of New Hampshire reps from Carroll County. We also, when we formed the committee, Jeb Bradley insisted on being on our committee as well. So we are well represented in Carroll County on this committee. We have been in touch and received presentations from several ISPs. We did attend that St. Anselm's conference on digital inequality back last June, I believe it was, where we met a lot of the folks that are on the meeting today. We have put together, supported, and whatnot, some of the legislation that has come forward in Concord that you talked about earlier. And I'd like to take an opportunity on behalf of our committee to thank the reps that are and the senators that are on this video meeting, and thank you for your support of that legislation as well. Because I think it's going to be important down the road. There will be more legislation coming this year because we're working on it right now. We have met several times until this emergency happened. Several weeks ago, my co-chair, Steve Knox, suffered a stroke. So I'm doing twice the work right now, and he's on the mend. The CARES Act grant, I think Tim Murphy nailed it with his description of all the inadequacies of the RFP. They were just too numerous. I spent hours on the phone with CCI and Spectrum and Charter and several of those groups, and they're all shaking their heads. You know, between inventory and meeting deadlines and coming up with funds, it's going to leave most municipalities out of the picture because, as you know, we have to follow budget law. I think it's a little too late. $50 million would have gone a long way to solving the problem in rural New Hampshire. I think everybody would agree on that. And as it was mentioned to me by somebody, and I won't mention their name, it was like a dog bone with a string tied to it that they threw out and kept pulling back. So that's kind of the history of Carroll County Broadband at this point. Currently, we are participating in a feasibility financial study of Carroll County in conjunction with a consortium of 3 organizations: CTC Technologies, Rural Innovations up in Vermont, and ValleyNet. They received the USDA grant to do feasibility studies in 6 areas and 4 different states, I believe it was. And we're in the middle of gathering the information for that feasibility and financial study. We just released a survey to Carroll County only, which is kind of the final step in our acquiring information before we see the results of the feasibility study. And we're in the process of doing that at the present time. And I'd be open to any questions or comments or suggestions or whatever. I personally am a selectman, chairman of the select board in Albany, New Hampshire.
Thanks, Rick, for the setup and the overview. Maybe I'll jump in with the first quick question. It's kind of just a curiosity of mine. I'm wondering if Carroll County Broadband is interested in particular to the communications union district model, since you've been kind of approaching this as a county.
Yes, well, we supported it, and some of the idea came from rural New Hampshire. Jeb Bradley got on board and supported the district legislation because I think it would be beneficial down the road. There are still going to be hurdles, but yes, I think it's a good thing to move forward with. The district is what we're looking at in particular.
Thank you. Anyone else with a question for Rick? Carol Monroe, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
So I want to commend Rick and his group in Carroll County. I think that he's, it takes a leader, and we always talk about this at every occasion in terms of what do I do next in my town? Well, the first thing to do is to find a champion who will move things forward, and I think Rick and Steve have done that in Carroll County. It will make a great test of the district language. I'm hoping that it gets signed by the governor soon, and so that can be moved forward. And it will be interesting to see how that happens. But Carroll County is a lot like a lot of places in New Hampshire. You have some very, I wouldn't call them densely populated, but more populated areas like North Conway or Wolfboro. And then you have some very small towns that have very few houses who don't want to be left behind, and they want to be served. And so when people stand together and you aggregate that demand, then it makes a much more attractive package to do a public-private partnership or even a district-owned network with an outsourced operator. A number of opportunities arise from that, and so we'd like to see this move forward. And ValleyNet and Rural Innovation Strategies are working on that feasibility and business planning to make that more attractive. And then the next step would probably be RFPs, but it'd be great to find some funding in New Hampshire. That's always been the struggle, is to get these things off the ground and get them funded. So I'm watching at the federal level. I'm not holding my breath, but it's, one step at a time.
Henry, this is Rick again. Another thing we've been also doing is reaching out to surrounding counties primarily. We have met with the folks over in Grafton County and also the folks up in Coos County, New Hampshire, because there's a lot of interest up there. And, one of the items that we really emphasize in our own committee is we're stronger in numbers. And since rural New Hampshire suffers from the same problems, whether you're in your neck of the woods or in my neck of the woods or way up north in Coos County, we all suffer from the same issues with regard to broadband and access to it. And nothing has exacerbated it more than the present emergency pandemic that we're all witnessing. So, we're reaching out. One of the reasons I agreed to meet with you folks at the request of Henry was to expand on this. We should all be working together with regard to this issue. because we're better in numbers. And I think that held true with the vote on this HB 1111 that was just passed by both houses. And I am confident that the governor will sign off on it. One of the biggest issues that we're experiencing and finding out, searching information for our feasibility study, is one of the biggest nuts to crack is pole access. And that's going to happen in all of rural New Hampshire, whether it's Carroll County or in your neck of the woods. And we're going to be proposing legislation coming up here to basically direct the PUC to adopt the FCC one-touch pole access requirements, which expedites the process and makes it less cumbersome and consequently less expensive. So stay tuned. There's more legislation coming.
Thanks, Rick. And we want to stay in touch, and you will find out. You'll probably permanently be on the email list for this group. So that's one way you'll stay connected to what we're up to. And we want to hear what you're doing as well.
Oh, no, I agree. I mean, we'll keep you on our list and vice versa. We've done the same thing with Grafton and Coos County. Michelle up at North Country Council has really taken the bull by the horns up there and started a educational program going on in the northern part of the state. And we've agreed to help her, with that project as well.
Henry,
Thanks,
you're
Rick.
muted.
Yeah, thanks. I see one question in the chat from Todd Horner in our office. Rick, he is wondering if the meetings of the group are held virtually or not. How are you meeting these days?
Well, we're not meeting face to face at this point. We are meeting virtually. We had a meeting a week ago Thursday to kick off our Carroll County survey that Rural Innovations and North Country Council put together for us to get a better handle on who's got what for service in Carroll County. Our meetings are attended by anywhere from 30 to 60 people. We invite the public to attend if they wish. We operate under 91, under right to know, 91A.
Thanks. Other questions for Rick? Or Rick, any questions of us before we move on the agenda?
No, I think listening to the comments, I'm pretty much in agreement with a lot of them. And I think we all share a lot of the same problems. And I know Mike Reed has been around talking to everybody in Maine and New Hampshire. And I don't know if he's got to Vermont yet, but he's probably hearing the same exact thing.
You're right, Rick. You're right.
I think we all got to stick together and work together on this, because I think it's going to benefit us all if we do.
Well, thank you, Rick, for joining us at this meeting, and feel free to stay on for the next couple of items.
Okay, no, my internet speed right now is at 3.5 coming in and 0.9 going out. I've got that dinosaur slow DSL, as they call it.
I hadn't heard that one before we talked.
I saved it for you.
The next item, agenda 5. I'm going to turn to my colleague, coworker Todd Horner to address. And mainly Todd has spent some time in developing some guidance for municipalities that want to pursue the municipal bonding Chesterfield model process, and sketching that out a little bit more. So I want to turn to Todd to introduce that and tell us a little bit about that, where that project is at right now.
Sure, Henry, and I'm gonna commandeer the screen sharing here. Let's see if this works. Just provide a visual. So yeah, as Henry noted, the Planning Commission has started developing what we're calling a broadband implementation guide, and you know, we have some trailblazers in our region who have made, you know, significant progress towards expanding broadband connectivity. And one aim of this guide is to document the knowledge and experience gained through implementing broadband expansion projects. We have towns who have made a lot of progress, and we have towns that are earlier on in the process of thinking about expanding broadband connectivity. So hopefully this guide will make the road a little less steep for municipalities that are considering following in the steps of some of the trailblazers, and you know, some of the content of this guide might be old news or familiar territory for folks on this call, but it's important to remember that, you know, some towns in our region haven't really begun walking down this path quite yet. So this guide is really aimed at the citizen in a town who's starting essentially from square one. They recognize there's a problem. You know, they've probably seen over the past months with social distancing and, you know, remote learning and all of that, how broadband is even more important. But they're not sure exactly how to improve the situation, what their options are. So this guide starts all the way, you know, at, you know, why broadband is important, you know, how to form a broadband committee, why you would want to form a broadband committee, looking at assessing needs and readiness in your community as it relates to broadband, and getting into the request for information that some of the towns in our region have issued as a means of following what we all colloquially call the Chesterfield model. This guide isn't specific to the Chesterfield model. Some of these initial steps are really intended to provide guidance to municipalities that may or may not pursue that particular implementation strategy. We were just talking earlier on this call about how new policies are coming online that might expand the range of tools at a municipality's disposal. So some of these initial steps covered in the guide would be applicable to towns that are exploring other implementation techniques. But with that being said, it does focus on the details of the Chesterfield model, including issuing a request for proposals, the bond issuance process. It's really intended to provide some detailed guidance on, you know, how to get from here to there. Here being, you don't have broadband today. There, you know, getting to a bond issuance, passing at town vote, and actually connecting households that didn't previously have broadband service. So this, I have the table of contents up on the screen right now. This is all a work in progress. Eventually the goal is to provide a roadmap. Some aspects of the guide might be higher level. Some other aspects might be more detailed, like you'll see at the bottom of the screen. We're actually going to include a model municipal broadband survey that synthesizes surveys that have been conducted in our region already, other parts of northern New England, to provide guidance to folks who are interested in doing something similar in their community. We don't have a specific publication date set right now, but the goal is to have this be publicly available this summer. Prior to a final draft being published, we do intend to share a draft for comments, because honestly, the folks on this call are the real experts on this issue. And our job at the Planning Commission is to set pen to paper and make sure that all of that experience that is in the heads of the local champions that have actually gone through the process is accessible for folks who might be interested in doing something similar. So look for that draft for comments in the weeks to come. Definitely interested in hearing feedback from you all in terms of what is this guide missing? What would you like to see included? We have a lot of great policy tools that have come online recently and are coming online in the future. This guide won't cover all of those initially. It does focus on the Chesterfield model process, but maybe in the future there's a chapter, for example, on communication districts. Not sure. We have to start somewhere, and hopefully this guide will reduce the load or the burden that volunteers in our communities need to bear in order to expand broadband connectivity. So happy to answer questions now or offline. I see we're already past 2 o'clock. That was Henry's target, so maybe offline is more appropriate, but I'll post my email in the chat for anyone who wants to get in touch. Thanks, Henry.
Thank you, Todd, for keeping that so punchy. I think it would be useful to keep going, and would invite people to reach out to Todd via the email post share in chat. It's also on our broadband page. And one thing you could do to help right now, maybe as someone who you feel like you could benefit a lot from learning more, share with Todd a couple of the questions that you're struggling with, and that will at least let us know we need to cover this in a good amount of detail. Could help us prioritize content as this is developed. So thank you again, Todd, and please reach out to him via email, or if you reach me, I'll forward on to him. So just to keep going, we will wrap up by 2:30. Just set us up that last meeting we heard about the state releasing a broadband survey in response to what's been going on with the pandemic and internet use. We also noted that there were only a handful of responses from our region, and have gotten the word out since then. Mike Reed of Mission Broadband, who's joined us previously, has offered to give us an update on where the results are for the state so far. This is an ongoing survey, and we still need you to help get the word out to continue to have our region, your community represented in the results. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you, and just give me the word and I'll advance your slides.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to add to Carol's comment about there's still hope in DC. I do some work. We have a bill down there that we're working on to try to get broadband funding. We've worked with Senator Shaheen's office very closely. We've been working with Senator Klobuchar's office in Minnesota. So there is more work coming, more news coming. I'm not sure it's going to get down to exactly where we need it, but getting the word out and your effort in reacting to the CARES process may not work for this round, but there may be money left over, or there may be another round. So I would urge you to do that. Just a quick reminder, this is a survey that Mission Broadband put together quickly because of what everyone was going through with social distancing and being at home. We offered it to the states, Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. We're just gathering the data, putting it in whatever format people would like. We're happy to share. The goal here was not to have Mission Broadband have a bunch of data that they would just hand out to certain people. It's available to anyone. In fact, Henry has the entire data dump that the most recent one. Carroll Miller has been extraordinarily helpful. She and some other members, her friends, colleagues, added some questions to this, the original survey. So this is New Hampshire specific, again, with New Hampshire input. Very high level, Henry wanted me to share where we were. Very good, over 3,000 responses in about a month. You can turn the slide, Henry. Oh, isn't that a fancy? I can tell you, I didn't put this together. So it's been just a bit over a month. We've got over 3,000 responses, pretty well spread out geographically. I think it was whoever grabbed it and put the link up on their website first, had a whole early batch going down the river. You know, we had Orford and Lyme, and it was very specific, but now it's much more spread out. Go ahead, Henry. Oh, I hope you can all see this. I'm not sure I can. Let me find my glasses. Sorry. Oh, yes. And there's not going to be anything here that surprises people who have been working on broadband. There's a couple of things that interested me, though. In general, we're seeing about 5% of the people who responded did not have access to broadband during this virus period. Henry, go ahead. Next slide, please. And how important was it? We all know this. Everyone, vast majority, well over, said it's very important. Next. This is one I'm not sure how to get under the hood on this one. I have this discussion with every community and group that I speak with. When we talk about affordable broadband, I don't know the definition because it's different for everyone. And I don't know what individual towns can do. This, to me, is one of the more concerning statistics in here. There's a couple more. Next, Henry. This is the one that is really troubling. So we only have 5% of the people don't have it, but we have well over 50% of the people it's not acceptable. And I think, you know, maybe Rick gave us a good example today of why people feel that way. This is a very concerning statistic as far as I'm concerned. Next, Henry. You know, this, I don't think anyone's surprised here. We know how much cable's out there, how much copper's out there. One thing we didn't talk about during the RDOF, we're anxious to see what the satellite impact is going to be on that. We're expecting a significant application or auction from bids from satellite companies. Next. Again, this is another one that's interesting. Would you pay more to enhance your service? So I don't buy any more than I have to buy. Maybe that's what people feel here. I don't know how to get under the hood on this one. Next, Henry. This one, internet is not available. There was a very small number, as you know, 5%. But again, internet is not affordable. And I think you could say no computer or mobile device may fall into that same category if not affordable. Next, Henry. And again, there's no surprise here. Telecommuting from work was just an amazing period we went through. I just watched, a friend of mine is the CIO for the state of Maine. 6,000 employees went home. I mean, we reorganized in about a week, 2 weeks to get people working at home. So no surprise, the K through 12 was very, very troubling that kids couldn't do their homework. But you can view these. Henry has these, happy to send these out. Henry can, or I will. Anybody can reach out to me. I think that was the last one, Henry. Yeah. Oh, I wanted to show you this. I tried to do this for Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Vermont has had so much going on with surveys that they had survey fatigue and hasn't taken advantage. But I just wanted to compare Maine and New Hampshire. The survey has been out almost a month longer in Maine, but the same number without internet. Dissatisfied service a little lower. I'm not exactly sure what that tells me, but I think it tells me we're chasing the same thing no matter where we are, 5% not served. Smaller communities, it's really, I'm looking, I have a client here, right, town next door to me, it's 1,000, 1,500 residents, and this survey matches up pretty well with that smaller group. So that's all I wanted to share, Henry. Again, Henry said it in the beginning, get the word out. People ask, how long are we going to leave this survey up? Well, until people stop responding and providing results. And we're just keep it up there. The goal is we all use this data to help move the ball forward. And if it helps to maybe include some of this data in your discussion with OSI or anyone else, feel free. I have no problem with that whatsoever. Anything to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. That was great. And so these are the total responses on the survey. Just want to point out, in our region, we have hundreds of responses. Wouldn't it be great if we had thousands? And just to let you know, you can go to swrpc.org/broadband to find a link to this. You can Google it. And that in the survey, participants are asked what town they're in. So there'll be some opportunity to compile surveys for individual municipalities. So please help to get the word out.
Yeah, and for those of you who are creating surveys, just sort. If there's information for your town here, it might help you take a deeper dive into the survey you're building. So that's what I do with some, well, in fact, I talked myself out of a paying job because town wanted us to do a survey for them, and I said, wait, here's free. I don't think you can beat that. And they were able to just then have just 2 or 3 questions to go to the town to help narrow down a specific area they wanted to zoom in on. So please feel free to use this. That's what it's for.
Mike, there is one question that's in the chat. Karen's wondering if you have a goal for the number of responses.
I do not. I do not. I don't know. You hear survey data that says it's, you get 2%, you're doing well. I have one client, I think they ended up with about 12% response. I think that's phenomenal. 6%, 7% would be wonderful, but I honestly don't know. It's how we got it out. We did put out a press release in Maine, and that we got a big surge of activity. We tried to press release in New Hampshire, and I think only one media outlet picked it up. So we have a quote from Carroll in there too. So, but our PR agency is still trying to work on anything to get more data.
Thanks, Mike. Well, we're looking forward to following that. So let's keep on moving to Agenda 7, which is other updates. And this is kind of a roundtable. where we invite anyone to share what their community is working on. Maybe you have a broadband committee, maybe you're just an individual attendee. Please raise your hand and we'll go from there. And while we're waiting for hands, I did get a couple of updates via email for people who couldn't attend. One is that, as Carol mentioned, well, both Westmoreland and Walpole are waiting on their bond sale, which is scheduled for just 1 week from today. The town of Walpole let me know that even though the bond hasn't gone through, they're actively working with CCI on mapping out the routes for cable, things like that, with the intent of moving forward. So those were a couple updates that came into me via email. Other updates people want to share? Okay. Oh, okay. Lisa, go ahead.
Hi, sure. I think I'm the only person from the Harrisville committee here. So I'll just say that Harrisville's moving forward. Also, kind of along the same timeline that you just mentioned for the other towns. Harrisville was a town that passed its bond, SB 170 bond in March. And we've met with CCI. We have our town's project manager working hard. They're working hard. And they're telling us that we'll be opened up for participants, the first wave of signups, maybe as early as October, and maybe have fiber in place by the end of December, though they said over and over again, these are our preliminary dates, don't hold us to this yet. But I was just thrilled that they were even making 2020 a possibility.
Thanks for the update, Lisa, and being the first. Anyone else? Okay. Well, I know we ran a little longer maybe than expected for people. As always, feel free to let me know what you're working on. I can share it with the group at the next meeting. And I think we can kind of wrap things up if there aren't other items to share. So as far as next steps, one is that from me or our office, there'll be some announcement about collecting some feedback on Connecting New Hampshire. Take a look out for that. As far as the next meeting, I think we'll kind of go back to more of our typical spacing. So look a couple months out, maybe September, October, or unless for some reason there's a need to meet sooner. And I think that takes us to adjournment. I do have a quick poll that we'd love for you to participate in. It tells us that these things are valuable to you. So please take a moment if that's coming up on your screen and weigh in. And then we can be adjourned. Thank you everyone for coming in after the holiday weekends. And just as a reminder, I will be posting the slides and recording to our webpage this week. I'll send out an announcement when that's been done. Thank you, everyone.